I don't want to just complain, but sharing your drama seems to sell. So I'm going to give you a little drama today.
No, we're not.
We're
not about to keep complaining, promise.
We're actually going to do the opposite because we're thinking about like, when is complaining too much? Because I know my dear sister.
About sick of her. We thrive on venting and feeling like we need to trauma bond. How can we all just be happy? And not happy like without challenges or conflicts coming up, but just how can we be content, solution focused and oriented, and not just thriving in the misery. And I complain too, so don't get me wrong here. I'm not above it.
She just complains about me.
That's funny. All right. I don't know. Would we schedule our time to go out to eat?
No.
I don't think so.
This is Sistas Declassified, the podcast where
Taylor
and Taryn,
your virtual sisters, share experiences, insights, and of course the juicy secrets that never leave the sister circle.
So shh, listen up. The Declassified convos are starting now. Welcome back to Sistas Declassified. We're the real life sisters who decided to start a podcast instead of gossiping.
But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe so you can get your weekly dose of declassified moments. And you can also find us on TikTok and Instagram at Sistas Declassified.
Well, my hunger pains, I guess, are in line with today's episode.
Right. Always complaining.
I am just expressive.
Anyway, hi, we're back. And she's in a mood because she wants to eat.
I don't want to just complain. I do feel like complaining seems to sell. Like people should, well, maybe not complaining, but sharing your drama seems to sell. So I'm going to give you a little drama today.
Yeah, I will say, complaints and outrage, they definitely sell.
Like I just think about what goes viral, what pops, and it's usually beef or somebody spilling their dirty secrets. I think of my girl, Reesa Teesa. Was telling you don't remember that? This is maybe like 3 months ago now. She's getting a docu-series. She did like a 50-part 10-minute long TikTok series about her husband who was a liar and a cheater and used to pretend to talk on the phone to his dead siblings every day. And
I don't know who Reesa Teesa is, so this is like I don't know anything about this.
Get on the horn. Get on the phone.
The horn?
What? It's old. I don't know. White. Anyway, it'll pop right up. You never saw this girl?
No, she's on a flight.
Well, that's because after her saga, she got to the bag.
I see she got 3.5 million followers.
She's done interviews on TV. Anyway.
Basically, it's like what is that? Random Man from Atlanta?
Yes, exactly. Okay. It's exactly like that. Where people just trauma dump, for lack of better words.
And then get famous
get famous for it. And every day I think, why don't I just do that?
Really? Like actually really tell the world your problems?
Like, and y'all don't really care.
Right. People like to see people's demise.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's in such like a pointed way. It's more just like, wow, your life sucks. And I get to watch somebody else's life suck without thinking about mine. So
well,
it like distracts
it's not just
me from that.
I think it's also relatable. Right?
Sure.
Everybody has stuff that's going on behind closed doors. And so when somebody actually airs out their thing that's happening, it's like, okay, like,
yes,
we all have something.
We all have something. And I think there's just a delicate line between, sharing your story and like when you then monetize it, I just think it's a fine line, but obviously the drama sells. We know this. And so we are bringing the drama today. No, just kidding.
No, we're not. We're not about to keep complaining. Promise.
We're not. We're actually going to do the opposite because we're thinking about I've been thinking about also, when is complaining too much? Because I know my dear sister.
About sick of her.
She's sick of me. She feels like I complain too much. Like I said, I'm just expressive. But, I do think there's a balance. You do have to be self-aware and recognize when I've gone from venting to complaining to please shut the hell up, know?
And not even just that, but it's like, can I do something about this thing I'm complaining about? Because that's the thing for me.
Yeah.
So if I've heard you complain about it, I'm not even going to give a number, but enough times, and you still haven't done anything, that's where I'm like, all right, what are we doing?
Yeah. And maybe that's where the neurodivergence kicks in a little bit, because you can't have the same conversation twice. Some people can tolerate it. What
I can have the
can't.
same conversation twice. Like that's what my job is. We having the same
No,
conversation.
you can get paid to have the same conversation twice, but in your personal life, no.
Depends on who it is.
Okay, if it's me, you can't do it. If it's your mama, you can't do it. If it's your daddy, you see, there's a theme.
Maybe
you can't do it.
Something in y'all's water. But anyway, back to the topic at hand.
So I guess that brings us to our declassified moment for today. Sure, let it all out, complain, but I guess just recognize while you're doing all that complaining, you are likely dodging some solutions, right? Because venting can be good, and we could talk about what venting is versus what it's not in just a minute. But like, at some point, you got to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make a decision.
Definitely. Because I do agree that venting serves a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you really do need to be validated in how you feel. Mm-hmm. And so getting that venting session out with whoever you trust to talk to is very comforting for people. Mm-hmm. And reassuring and affirming and all that good stuff. But there's just a limit. And I think that's what I was trying to say before. And it's like, if I've heard you talk about this for a month or two or even years, right? Because I even have my own things that I talk about or I'll complain about kind of flippantly. I'm not necessarily asking for a response from somebody that I could be talking about this for years, like weight loss or something, right? I've been trying to do that for a long time. But it's like, I could keep talking about it or I could do something about it. And so I have had to check myself. It's like, stop saying that, because you're still sitting at home eating your donuts in bed. Not really donuts. I don't know. That was just the first thing that came to my head.
Donuts are good.
They are good. But just, I recognize I'm not waking up and exercising every day, right? So there's no reason for me to keep putting this complaint out into the world.
Right. It's definitely, your example sounds like a don't talk about it, be about it kind of thing.
But that's what I feel like venting ultimately is like, how long do you get to do that before you do something about it?
Yeah. And I guess it depends, because like sometimes we could be venting about things we're grieving about. And I know that can be a different experience than venting about something you're frustrated about or confused about. Because like when we're thinking about the purpose of venting, and you know, there are some therapeutic aspects to getting it out, and I'm thinking of like support groups or being able to have a community where folks are going through the same sort of loss or experiencing the same things.
But one is like venting versus like processing. Because like,
talk about it. See, this is why she got that piece of paper.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, stop telling them my job. Anyway, I just think, are you venting to like bash or talk bad, or even in the grief, are we saying like, life, we recognize life won't be the same, right? But how can you live with the values that the person is that you're grieving left? Or even like grieving a relationship that maybe the person is still alive, and you just don't have access to them. You do need to get those thoughts and feelings out. But again, what is the purpose of the conversation that you're having? Are you venting, oh, I miss them so much, I can't go on without them, my life is ruined, blah, blah, blah. Because that's like more of a complaint. Right. Versus like, I feel really sad that this relationship didn't continue the way that I wanted it to, but I could see this, this, and this, or I learned this, this, and this, or I'm having a hard time with my emotions because of this. And so I want to talk about that. Right.
Yeah, I guess that is a nice distinction between processing or verbalizing your feelings versus just sitting, I guess, in the negativity of the event or thing that you're processing. Yeah. And talking about how bad it is or woe is meing it.
Like the victimhood of it all.
Yeah. And I mean, as a complainer, back up, as someone who can complain, as we all can complain, it can be vindicating to sit in that. I can definitely admit that. Because again, I'm expressive, right? And I feel validated when I'm able to express myself, even if you don't get it, right? I can definitely see how venting can be kind of I guess a crutch you fall into, because I could say I'm just expressing myself. But am I expressing myself, or am I like talking myself in circles? And
like, are you trying to gain understanding and meaning, or are you just
am I just
talking
out here
to hear yourself talk?
Yeah.
Which obviously,
which I might be,
depending on the situation or like where you're at in that journey of processing that situation or experience, you might just need to vent because your thoughts are all over the place.
Right.
And that's fully understandable. So I don't want you guys to get us wrong here. It's just that, like, where is the point that venting goes too far? So I gave you my perspective. Do you have an opinion, since you are the one that feels like you do this? Do you recognize when you've done it enough?
I think I recognize in my body when I've let something go, or when something's gone on too long. Like if I feel myself still feeling like physically reacting to the thing I'm upset about, then it probably is something I need to process and get out. If I find myself, I guess, more heady about it, and that like I'm sharing this almost like because it's a little shady, or I'm sharing this because I'm gossiping, or I'm sharing, like I think I'm trying to be intentional about where the vent is coming from. Is it coming from me being messy? Is it coming from me having a unmet need? Is it like just figuring that out? I think is helpful. And then I also think about who gets it. My therapist gets some, because I feel like that's a great place to put anything.
Yeah.
My husband gets some, you get some, mom gets some. So I think I try to be strategic about who gets what.
It's like, I already vented about this to Taylor, so I'm gonna go talk to mom now.
Exactly.
So it's not that you're finding limits; you're just finding a limit on who to put it on.
I am limiting the venting that each person gets. Now, for myself personally, I just try to be mindful of whether I'm venting or processing, and who I would rather vent or process with. And I've gotten good with this with mom, naming whether I'm venting or processing, because then I also give the other person the opportunity to say, okay, that's enough. Right. You vented, you got it out. Or, oh, okay, you're processing this. Maybe I could ask you a question or two about it, versus just like hearing you out for 2 or 3 minutes and letting you go, and then moving on.
I also think about, I kind of mentioned how I was learning how to process externally versus internally and needing that validation from others. And I feel like venting is really something people do when they need external validation. And so how often do you take opportunities to look within and like do that internal venting? Do you journal? Do you process your thoughts without having to place them onto other people? Can you go through a situation not alone, right? Because people can know that you're going through something, but they don't have to know every thought that you're having in that thing you're going through.
Right. I definitely journal. I find that to be helpful. Now, I don't always remember it in the moments where I'm probably feeling the most like triggered or heightened. But I have found it to be helpful. Sometimes even just like turning on my phone and talking to myself.
Like a voice memo.
Or recording a video, that can be helpful too. Because then I'm just talking. Or sometimes I will just talk out loud. Like if I'm in the car, driving from A to B.
It's like too much is in my head. I need to get it out.
I will just start talking. And sometimes I feel a little like,
am I Lulu?
But then I'm like, I don't think I would be able to do this if I wasn't supposed to. So I'm gonna just keep talking. If God didn't want me to talk to myself, he wouldn't have given me the ability to have a dialogue with myself. So
yeah,
I'm gonna keep doing it because it helps me process.
And I also think about like when you're venting, and maybe you lean into that often, so like you end up venting about your partner all the time to people around, and so then people create an image of what your partner is, or how you feel about your relationship, or how you feel about your job, how you feel about your life, how you feel about you, because of the amount that you vent.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I get that from mom sometimes, where she's like,
she thinks you're not well.
I wouldn't have thought you thought that, because you always say X, or I wouldn't have thought you would.
The surprise party. You want a surprise party, but every time how many people are going to be there? Is there going to be parking? Is there this? Is there that? Like, you don't want a surprise party. So that was a shocking thing because of how you vent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which sometimes does bite me in the ass, because then like people make assumptions about things that I want or don't want. And then I'm like, why do you think that? Or like, where did you get that from? And they're like, from you. And it's just because I had shared something that I needed to process, but instead was processing with or venting about.
And when you're venting, you're not speaking with intention. So, but you're still creating perceptions.
Right.
So, and obviously you don't always want to have to speak with intention. So don't get me wrong there.
It is draining.
It's very draining. But it's just, if you default to venting a lot, that means that you're saying a lot of things that maybe you don't even mean.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Anyway.
Well, I guess we could talk about specifically maybe some areas where this shows up, or where folks might be challenged by venting or trying not to vent.
I feel like partner relationships is the biggest one that people vent about outside of their relationship. And it's like a learned behavior that you have to keep stuff to yourself.
As a venter, I can say, yes, I work real hard to be intentional with my words when I share anything about my relationship, because I know how important it is, I guess.
Especially when it's new. Because I feel like people are super quick to vent to somebody, like, is this weird? Is this a red flag? And the person on the outside who has only heard your perspective is like, yep, kind of weird. Then you move on.
Right.
Or you start to just take note of all the little red flags that you've shared with other people and gotten their perspective on. And now you're like done with this relationship. Or maybe you just see it differently.
Yeah, I think there's a flip side to that too, though, because I mean, I personally don't have friends like this, but I know that these dynamics exist where you have friends who pop up when they're arguing with their partner or the boyfriend or whatever, and they're telling you all the bad things he did, and that he's awful, and that he's emotionally unavailable, and then 2 weeks later they're back together again, but you know that he cheated on her and blocked her and took her car for a week, and you're supposed to just be back in his face like it's normal.
Right.
No,
absolutely not. And that's the same for like family members too. You find out your friend or even your partner, whoever, their family did some wild stuff, and then you got to pop up and be around them, and it's like,
I don't like these people.
I don't like them. Right, the energy's off. They did you dirty. I'm good here.
Right. When I maybe only got part of the story, didn't get what led up to this event, and yeah, there's just stuff that's missing, or even the fact that they apologize and that you've since reconciled, and you might have told me that, oh yeah, it's cool, we're cool now, but versus the 5 hours you spent yelling on the phone with me to tell me about how awful they were.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that also speaks to just like people kind of in general. We can find it a lot easier. And as we get older, we find it a lot easier to talk about things we don't like or things that didn't go well versus focusing on things that did go well or things that are positive. I know that's something I am working towards improving, and just having more gratitude, because I think the more gratitude you have, the harder it is to vent. Because you're able to see how much good outweighs the thing that annoys you.
Definitely. And I think having gratitude in each space of your life. So like, do you know your identities and how you, like, I'm a daughter. I'm tired of talking about my job. I'm a worker. I'm a partner. I'm a friend. And so like, what can you notice and be grateful for in each of those spaces before you vent? Or before you decide like this situation is so bad that it's built up and I need to vent. Like, is it that bad?
Yeah. Because sometimes you can find yourself reacting real big to something that's actually real small. And like, when I say actually, I mean, in a week from now, you may look back and go, I remember those big feelings. But when I think about the fact that I missed the train, it's really not that big of a deal. And then being able to look backwards, I can see that I missed the train, but I caught the next one and I still made it to my meeting on time. Like, but
or I didn't make it on time, but it was fine.
Or I didn't make it on time and it was fine. But in that moment, you're so, I cannot believe I missed the train. Right. And it just like, it's interesting what time and space will do. Because oftentimes we're just feeling real big, and we should really think about why we're feeling big as opposed to that thing that went wrong, because that's usually not the problem.
Right. back to was that this episode that I said that like the experience isn't necessarily negative, but the thoughts that you're having about it.
Girl, I don't remember when you said it, but it was important when you said it.
So I just think that's really true in every circumstance. It's like everything is not a big deal once you realize this earth is a made up. Like everything we do on this earth is a made up concept. So
I find myself, well, especially when I was working in direct service with kids, and most recently, like as a site leader and manager, I found myself having to remind folks, which is interesting because I'm usually the more anxious one, but in that space, I feel pretty confident. So like most problems, I felt like I knew what to do. Now, would I be annoyed by them potentially? Yeah. But like, I didn't feel like anxious about solving things, but I had team members who were new and new to their roles who would be anxious about stuff. And I'm like, at the end of the day, none of this is emergency work. Did anybody die? Did we lose any children? Did they all go home safe? Woo. Okay, we did it, right? And so some of the stuff that people would feel like I would feel like I was getting complained to about, I'm like, this stuff don't matter. You got your check?
Which right, like, and we're not saying you do the bare minimum, right?
Yeah, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm more just saying like perspective is just so interesting because just a few years ago, I was in their shoes and everything was important and it had to be like this, and you had to turn this in on time, and the kids need to be in line like this.
And once you see these systems as a whole bunch of people bullshit, you're like, okay.
No. We do want to do good work, and we do good work.
Right. And I'm not even saying it like that. I'm just saying the pressure comes off.
The pressure comes off for sure.
And I think if you can look at all situations like that, not just your job,
right,
but as like every situation is not that big of a deal.
Girl, I missed the flight. We missed our flight back from our honeymoon. I broke down crying at the gate. Bashan looked at me like, why do you think there's only one airplane home? He was like, please go stand over there. Because I cannot. I was crying. Like, I could cry right now. I was crying.
The complaints, y'all.
I was crying. I was so distraught. We got on another flight 30 minutes later. But I was like, I was texting my mom. I can't believe it. I think I was texting in the group chat.
I was not replying.
I was texting in the group chat. I can't believe we missed this flight. We didn't know. The airport didn't tell us that we had. It was not.
My mom is sending paragraphs back. Taryn, it's gonna be okay. But anyways, that wasn't really a complaint. It was a situation, but again,
yeah.
It was something that was solvable and didn't require a meltdown.
It did not.
Now, let me say, feelings are valid. Feelings are valid, but you just have to ask yourself again, is this a problem we can solve? Because if it is, I can then manage my feelings.
Yes, and sometimes managing your feelings means I gotta cry first.
Sure, you have to feel your feelings, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, once you...
So don't feel like you can't cry. You can cry.
Yeah, you can definitely cry. And you can definitely vent, right? So I know we kind of got a little bit off, sorry, there. But yes, you can also vent. It's just about finding the balance between venting and complaining, and whether you still need to talk about this or whether you need to now be more solution oriented in the thing. No. Or creating like a system for yourself that you can handle it without having to put it all onto someone else.
Yeah. So you talked about finding balance, and I'm very much open to it. How do you do that?
I mean, I think each situation can be different.
Okay.
But if we're like in a case by case basis, let's talk about like a family example. Sometimes this hasn't happened recently, but like when we were having like familial conflict and I would call you and I'm complaining about the situation, at some point I end up being like, well, am I tripping?
Right.
Because I feel like, how can you change that venting into a constructive conversation or discussion? So maybe you need some feedback. Because sometimes I think that's the thing, is like when you vent, people feel like they need to validate you.
Our power just came back.
People feel like they need to validate you, and so maybe they don't give you any of that constructive feedback. And so then they just hear you talking about that thing, and they know it brings big feelings for you, so they just
want to
let
be there
you.
For you. Yeah.
So you have to then ask, like, okay, I've just said all that, but you see a flaw in what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
is there something that I'm missing because my emotions are blinding me?
So what I'm hearing from that is vent, but seek a solution at some determined point, right? And maybe have intention with how you're going into the conversation. So if you know you're going in to vent, say, hey, I'm just here to vent today. Just need a listening ear.
Take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Yep.
Because I'm just pissed.
Right. I'm on 10 today. So remember, you're hearing this from 10. I might ask you again about it on 2. And at that point, I would love to hear some of your perspective.
Exactly. So I think that can be really helpful. But you have to know that you are doing it. So that's the thing. Like, do you recognize when you're complaining? Okay.
Should we pause it?
Yes. So
our sound studio. Gosh.
Okay, sound studio. But I lost my train of thought. Our power came on and it was a hot mess. Okay. But anyway, I think all I was trying to say is just knowing the difference between when you're venting and when you're complaining, because then that allows you to do something differently. So when you start the conversation, do you check in with yourself like, all right, I'm about to go into this and complain away. I'm getting this off my chest. And then doing exactly like you're saying. Name that you're doing this. Say I might be tripping right now. Say I don't want any advice. I'm on 10.
Just need an ear.
Just need an ear. Right. So
just give me and oh my goshes.
Right. Oh no, he didn't.
I can't believe it. Wow.
And all that good stuff. Because yeah, I think we thrive on venting and feeling like we need to trauma bond.
And it be bonding.
It does. It's great. But
misery loves company.
Right. And how can we all just be happy? And not happy like without challenges or conflicts coming up, but just how can we be
I think it's content,
solution focused and oriented, and not just thriving in the misery.
Because it ain't fun.
It's not. We all hate it here.
We really do.
Yeah. So ultimately, we always talking about being self-aware. So
we can't help it.
That's our goal here.
It is.
So anyway, we're going to wrap it up and jump into our sister circle question. Okay. When you feel like venting, what is your go-to topic? And how can you shift that conversation to being something more positive or solution-oriented, productive?
Right. Because at the end of the day, you got to solve something. Otherwise, people are going to tune you out.
Or think you're just miserable.
And like you will be. You will be.
Yeah. So just reflect on that and maybe let us know in the comments below.
Because I can't be the only one complaining.
I'm sure you're not. And I complain too. So don't get me wrong here. I'm not above it.
She just complains about me.
That's funny. All right. We'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.